Thanks so much. So everyone, we're getting ready to close out this series of webcasts on using PowerShell for penetration testing on automation techniques. So want to dive right into the content because we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Unfortunately, for those of you who want me to go straight to the content, SANS makes me do a little about me. So I teach 504 and 555. They're both interesting classes. I'm very passionate about them, and I quite like teaching them both because they help you understand how attacks work, what to look for, and how to make your organization significantly more strong. When I'm not teaching for SANS, I'm the managing partner at InfoSec Innovations, and you can tweet me or follow what I've been doing at BetterSafetyNet on Twitter. Earlier in the pre-show banter, I mentioned I love teaching for SANS because it allows me to travel all over the world, and literally the next 2 weeks, I will be doing exactly that. I will be traveling around the earth for the very first time. I will be going from my hometown in Columbus to Tokyo, and then from Tokyo, I'll be going directly to London, and then from London back home. So my first time actually circumnavigating the earth. And I'll be teaching 555. It's not too late to sign up if you're interested, so go attend those if you can. And then I'm also going to be teaching 504 all over the place. So feel free to join the party, have a lot of fun with me, and learn how bad guys do what they do and what you can do to stop them with 504. This talk would not be possible without two very important people. Adam Crompton, his name has been mentioned routinely in all of my PowerShell research because he and I have just been doing so much over the years with PowerShell. And I also like to give a shout out to Josh Johnson, who's an up-and-coming SANS instructor, who's been taking my work and fixing it up, making it neater code, and challenging me to do better. And then there's this interesting virtuous cycle of improvement where we're trying to one-up each other on awesome hacks. So thanks to both of you guys for making me a better coder and just a better all-around good guy hacker. So today we're going to be talking about how you do automation. And the good news is with PowerShell, the whole point of automation is pretty much baked into it. PowerShell was developed because Windows was fundamentally lacking the ability for admins to do their particular actions at scale. Now, I know some of you are thinking, oh, but Mick, we have GPO. Oh, but Mick, we have SCCM. The answer is true. You do. Not every organization is using those technologies or using them to their full effect. So what Microsoft did is they made a scripting language called PowerShell that exposes many of the APIs that are used for common systems administration tasks. And the nifty thing is it now makes certain tasks easier than ever. The downside is, as a pen tester, it makes being evil easier than ever. So what we're going to be covering are a couple use cases of how you can automate things, or some things that are especially good to automate so that you can get some creative juices flowing. I want to be very clear about this. In the very limited time we have together, there is no practical way for me to give this topic enough coverage. If you want me to do a webinar that is focused on a particular aspect of PowerShell automation, please, please, please let me know so that we can make that happen for you. Now, why I love doing PowerShell automation from a penetration testing standpoint, is a variety of reasons. Probably the biggest for me, actually, is the reproducibility of testing. I find it very challenging when I do a pen test to have consistent pen tests year in, year out, engagement in, engagement out. And even for those of us who have gone to the extreme of making a list of do this attack, and it's like just a punch list that you walk through, it's very easy to skip a step. If you automate things and you have scripts that actually do this work for you, it's a lot easier to have the same steps done over and over again. even the most diligent of us can very easily skip a step or miss something. So reproducibility of testing is huge. The other item is allow more test coverage. For those of you who are not penetration testers, you don't appreciate how horrible the clock is during a pen test engagement. During a normal pen test engagement, you're going to have an engagement. Typically, the typical one is about a week. Some clients will go longer. Some will go much, much longer, where it's maybe a month or a quarter or even a year, but it's a slow and steady pen test. Those are rare. Typically, most engagements are a single week, and that is really horrible as a pen tester, because sometimes that full week can take you could burn that entire week learning how an environment's set up, how you evade different defenses, and what's going on that makes your client's network unique. So when an engagement starts, it's a race against the clock. Scripting allows you to go faster than you would normally. So leverage this, because otherwise you are not going to be able to get through all the items that you need to get through. Finally, the most important thing is that you can do the time-consuming, boring stuff. I actually have a couple of use cases where we're going to show PowerShell in action for that. I believe we have 2 demos coming up on that. So, use cases for automation. So, what you need to do, and this is an interesting mental flip that I went through a couple jobs ago. I started recording how fast I was going as a pen tester. And what I mean by that, and believe me, this was painful, I actually took a pen and paper and I started writing, I did this particular phase at this time, I did this attack at this time. And I was shocked at how much time I was burning on certain tasks. So what I would encourage you to do is start doing that yourself and find where you're spending too much time. And what I'm going to share with you are some of the items where I've found that I was going slower than I would like. Your mileage may vary. Some of you may see these and make fun of me and say, oh, Mick, I can't believe you're slow at this. I can run through this. That's awesome. If you see any of these and you've got tips on how I can go much faster, I'd love to hear them, because chances are there's things that you're slow at that I would love to get to share, like how I'm fast. So here's some things that slowed me down, is finding files. Unfortunately, when it comes to pen testing, a lot of times if we become domain admin, the business unit or our client doesn't really care. They're like, oh, big whoop, you're domain admin. What I found more interesting is to say, hey, I became domain admin, and once I had that, I was able to rifle through the entire domain, and I found your research documents, I found your salary info, I found all these interesting things, and it's very eye-opening for them. In a bit, I'll share with you a really cool framework and tool for finding files that are of interest. You can also find computers or of note or of interest, and we'll talk a bit about that. And then finally, everyone's section that they love to hate is reporting. So how do you go about finding files? When it comes to doing a pen test, you have a few options on how you go about conducting the pen test. There's some people who are of the school of thought that they run through the engagement, show the vulnerabilities, and say, here's what's going on, and this is bad. And to be fair, a lot of clients are happy with that. However, I would contend that clients are more happy when you can show them what a bad guy would be able to do once they got in the network. And one of my favorite things to do is showing what the business impact is by stealing sensitive documents, or at least getting access to sensitive documents. And if you think about it, having access to super secret docx is way more interesting and has a more, hits them in the gut, makes them realize that you had this level of access and that an adversary could do this. The problem is finding that. You're going to have to look through all the local systems and network shares, and that is super boring. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. In fact, to be honest, it's even harder than that. It's like finding a needle in a pile of needles. So how do you do this? Well, PowerShell automation can help here. It is boring, though. I'm a big like proponent of, if it's boring, you need to automate. So one thing that I will caution you is many, I'm not going to name names, but there are pen test companies out there that when they have to start looking through big data sets, they'll just have interns pour through the data. And quite frankly, I am not a fan of that approach at all. It's very slow, it's prone to mistakes, and you're not going to have reproducible results because not all interns are created equal. Some interns are really good, some are bad, so start scripting. Now, there's a variety of script tools out there that you can use, and I would contend that one of my favorite is something within the PowerSploit framework. And there's a lesser known module in the PowerSploit framework called Find Interesting File, and we're going to dive into that for just a moment. So the way Find Interesting File framework works, it's part of the PowerSploit recon modules. And I know some of you are saying, oh, PowerSploit, all the antivirus will catch that. The catch here is I'm not actually going to install all of PowerSploit. I'm just going to install one subset of PowerSploit, and it bypasses AV. I've not seen this caught very often. From time to time it gets caught, but it's fairly typical that this will just run in most organizations. And that subset is a tool called PowerView. And PowerView has a lot of different capabilities, a lot of different features. The shame and sorrow of it, though, is in my experience, when I go to the different hackathons, people are using PowerView to enumerate domain objects, figure out what's going on with relationships of computers and everything. I'm going to be clear. PowerView is a great tool to use for that. In fact, it's really good to do that because doing this by hand is also very tedious. But finding interesting file is way cooler in my opinion because it allows you to rifle through file systems at a real quick speed. So without further ado, let me do a demo on Find Interesting File. So switching over to my VM. No, my VM went to sleep. Let's start the VM up. That was interesting. That shouldn't have gone to sleep like that. Sorry. Okay. I'm using the freely available modern.ie VMs so that you can see that you can do this for yourself very easily. So I log into my machine and simply cd into my demo directory. And I have an automation set here. And what I'm going to do now is import module PowerView. And I'm going to be able to now launch the PowerView extensions. And my favorite one is this Find, as I said, Interesting File. And what you can do with Find Interesting File is you can now look for certain files of different types. And one of my favorite switches is Office Docs. They actually allow you to very quickly and easily find Office Docs. And you just set the path that you want to look through, and you can see what's there. You can also search for things like start up PS1. Wait a second, I did that incorrectly. Search terms, start.text. And so now I can see the different things which are inside this particular path that I choose. Very sorry about that. Had a little demo bonk here. But you can specify your search terms that you're looking for. And this really quickly allows you to search through for different criteria. And what's really cool about this is this will work on both the local host and it can work on network shares. And there's some really fun things where if you provide credentials, you can actually walk through different criteria. I don't know if that was here. Let me make this a little more apparent. So you can look for things that were created within certain ranges. You can look for all sorts of stuff. And I'm here to tell you that I'm a huge, huge fan of this because you can, I've found plenty of things like password.txt file. I found salary info. All you need to do is start looking through for your search terms, and it's really this easy. Some of you are probably saying, yeah, this is kind of anticlimactic. Yeah, it kind of is, just because PowerShell makes things just that easy. So what do you want to look for? You know, Office documents. You can do -Office Docs, and it will do a search for various Office documents. If you're looking for password vault files, things like KeyPass local files, you can find them using this. MSIs. This one's really fun because I find that many organizations will, if the help desk will have a folder of installers that they use. If it's a long-term engagement, one of my favorite things to do is either weaponize an existing MSI, or as part of a social engineering campaign, I will upload a malicious MSI and either enter a help desk ticket or spoof via caller ID. I will spoof a message into the help desk and say, hey, I need you to install this particular application, and they'll go to the install share and they will run the MSI of my choice then, which is a very powerful and fun technique to use. You can also look for keys like the public key or private key of various servers. And I know a lot of people, when you hear me say, you know, finding public keys, that's not as juicy. I politely beg to differ, because if you now know that one of these machines exists, I, as the attacker, don't have to interact with that remote host. I've now found a key file and know, or at least have good belief, that there's some sort of interaction from the host that I'm working with to the host that that key file belongs to. So I know it sounds weird, but using Find Interesting Files can be a way to help map a network. And then the other item is look for interesting terms for your client. Hopefully, if you've done a good job of the reconnaissance phase, you'll see that there's various project names or teams that you can go after and use that to start building up your list of systems or terms that you're going to start hunting for, or maybe even teams. So it's a very powerful technique to use this sort of setup. So a couple things to point out. If you're going to use a tool like this, Find Interesting Files is a very nice tool, but it also is a sharp sword. You need to make sure that you don't saturate the network or cause I/O issues on the individual host, or especially the network share. And the reason why is you can very easily spin a disk to death if you're doing multiple searches, or you can saturate a network if you're doing multiple searches from a single host. Now, running multiple instances of the script is super, super easy. And this is true for anything within PowerShell, for instance. Running it within loops is super, super easy. There's two different ways that most people go about doing this. And I want to be clear, we're going to focus on using our own scripting against multiple systems. Tools like Empire or even within Metasploit, they have that scripting built in for us, which is fine. If you're gun shy and don't want to do this, you don't have to. But I'm here to say that doing this work by hand or building your own scale, like working at this with scale, is super easy. Because what I just showed is interacting with a single machine or maybe a single network share. That works, and that's fine. What I want you guys to do, though, is realize that you can run this script against the entire environment if you so choose. Most of the time, I actually do my work via iterative looping. I do not go through the entire like multi-threaded processes. And the reason why is sometimes I don't want to cause too much network traffic. So with an iterative loop, I'm just hitting one machine, going to the next machine, going to the next machine. Now, for some of you, this is beyond evident and easy to understand how this is done. For others, this will be your first time seeing this. I want to show you just how easy it is to accomplish this. I've made a mass attack proof of concept type tool. And I'm going to warn you, this is pretty anticlimactic here. All you need to do is make a file, name it targets.list or whatever you want it to be, and it would contain the IP address or domain name of the hosts that you're going to interact with. You use the get content commandlet to pull that list. We're going to put it in the targets variable. Then it's as simple as doing a for each loop. So for each computer in that targets list, we're going to invoke a command on the computer name, and we're going to run this particular task. And whatever you put in here will be executed on each machine. And if you wanted to have multiple commands run at the same time, what you would do is you would put in another script block, and that would be command 1, command 2, and so on, and it'll just rip through the network. And I've got a little demo of this going against my own machines here. So I'm going to do a demo mass attack. And what I'm going to be doing with this machine, or with this script, is remoting into the machine and enumerating some data which will be put into a file. So hopefully it will work through all the systems. And you'll see that it just very easily gives me, here's all the machines that I was working against. And now it's pretty easy. And it scales just that beautifully. So working across an entire domain, all you need to do is put in your targets in a list file using this technique, and you're done. Now, I would encourage you, I know this sounds weird, but unless you're dealing with a very large enterprise, this is probably the technique that I would use. And the reason why is, depending on the script that's run, it's only going to take a few moments for each script to execute. So until you get to several thousand machines, this technique works just fine. However, if you have a scope where your pen test is going to include tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of hosts, what you need to do is something a little different. There's two options that you can do for larger scoped pen tests. You can use this technique that we showed, and instead of having one single target list file, what you would do is split that target list file up and have that split file on different attack machines that are distributed, maybe geographically, or you would just have multiple systems doing that attack. If, however, you don't want to go that route, you only want to do your attacking from one system, PowerShell allows you to do a thing where you can use jobs to actually attack multiple systems or do multiple commands at once. And that's done via the start job commandlet. And with the start job commandlet, there's all kinds of cool features and elements that you can have. What I would encourage you to do is, one, get comfortable with the attack technique where you're iteratively looping. Once you're comfortable with this, what you will do is you will take that command that is used, and what you're going to do is just put it inside of a start job script block. And then whatever your attack was, whether it's reconnaissance. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just getting some comments that there's a typo in mass attack PS1 file. It says 5 curly braces. There's a typo in the mass attack PS1 file. There are 5 curly braces.
The demo one? The mass attack, let's see. Yeah, yep, let me check. So we have an open and a close. Oh, yep, there is. But I didn't run. I did not run the this mass attack. I ran a demo one that has just some different stuff. So that's a great catch. Thank you, whoever mentioned that, and thanks, Jason, for pointing that out. That's a little embarrassing. So thanks for pointing it out. So the good news is, once you get your particular script attack down, all you need to do is use a start block, or I'm sorry, start job, and use the script block, start job, and then you do the --script block, and then you will put your attack in those curly braces, and then from there you're off to the races. And there's plenty of amazing documentation on how to use this with PowerShell. What I would encourage you to do is go to the TechNet article, and they talk about how to do this. One thing that I would encourage you to do, and this is something that you need to ponder, is many organizations are still using techniques like PsExec in order to interact with remote systems, and I strongly encourage you to stop doing that. The reason you want to avoid using PsExec is that it does not have the same protections that WinRM has, Windows Remote Management. Windows Remote Management happens over TLS, which means usernames and password hashes are going to be protected as they move through the network, as is any data that comes back. So please start using WinRM. That's a little public service announcement. Anytime I talk about doing things at scale, I feel compelled to mention that, because from time to time there's teams who are a little reluctant to turn that on, and you actually should be using that. One last thing that I want to point out is this throttle limit command. You can actually limit the number of commands, and I strongly recommend that you do this, because if you don't, it is trivially easy to cause an outage in your network. So any questions about that?
Yeah, I got a few here. Do you need PowerShell Remoting enabled to run invoke command? If so, please suggest the effective way to get this enabled on an enterprise grade.
So let's just talk about enabling PowerShell Remoting, period, not just in engagements, because it's something that should be set up. There's a variety of ways that you can turn that on, and my preferred way to do that is via GPO. Now, obviously, as part of a pen test, you are usually not going to be able to, or even if you have the permissions, you're not going to be permitted by scoping issues to modify the GPO. So what you can do is you can use WMI to make a remote connection. Typically, for most organizations, that's permitted. You can make a WMI connection and do a process creation that will make the change, or you can make a reg config directly. That's probably the easiest way to go about doing that. Now, if you're in an organization and you're doing a pen test and they don't have Windows Remote Management enabled, you need to talk it out with your client or your customer to make sure that that's okay, because that is a pretty substantial change on the host, and I would be a little reluctant to make the change without their appropriate buy-in. Any other questions?
There was one. Can you show the demo-mass PS1 script?
I'll send a tweet about that. I'll put it up on GitHub. It's basically just what I'm doing is effectively what I showed you guys in this. The reason I'm a little reluctant to show the demo one is I have to redact it a touch more, because this demo mass has some proprietary type stuff that I'm doing. So what I'll do is I'll make GitHub of it. Here, let me make a note of this right now. Post demo mass.ps1. I'll put it on GitHub and I will share it with folks. That's my bad that I didn't redact some of my secret sauce as a pen tester. I have very little of it, but sorry, I do have to protect one bit. So, sorry.
No worries. And then the last question on this section is, how does this tool differ from running something like get child item or C colon recurse filter like star.exec?
Oh, yeah, so that's an awesome question. So there's a couple things I want to unpack in there. So Find Interesting Files has a few neat features versus the normal get child item where you're doing a recurse. So number one, by default, get child item, if a file has the attributes on it set to be hidden, you won't be able to see that when you do the get child item unless you explicitly tell it, hey, I want to see this. The other item is uh, with the Find Interesting Files, you will see those. The other item is there's a lot more power functions within the Find Interesting Files that allows you to auto map shares as needed. So you can give a UNC path and it will mount those with credentials that you supply if your particular user account doesn't have access to it. That's something you would have to do by hand if you were going to be using the get child. The other item that I find interesting is I've noticed that on pen tests, some of my more advanced clients are looking for specific command invocations where I'm, running parts of the PowerSploit, or I'm sorry, where I'm using PowerShell against the environment. And what's interesting is, as an attacker, I can, if they're not looking for PowerSploit usage, I can slide below the radar. Now, it's a very easy defensive fix, but I have twice now been in a situation where they did not notice the use of Find Interesting Files, but they did notice get child, and then they also noticed, or I'm sorry, get child item, and they also noticed the old command prompt method of dir/s, where you're looking across subdirectories, because those are commonly abused things that bad guys use to find files of note. So awesome questions. All right, so moving along. So as you can see, running things at scale is relatively easy, and you don't need to rely on PowerShell frameworks. Every time so far I've been doing a talk in this series on using PowerShell, people say, oh, well, Mick, our antivirus solution will detect PowerShell Empire, PowerSploit, Nightshade, whatever, you name the framework, it detects it. And I say, cool, good for you. The problem is, if you're detecting only the framework use, I'm going to be able to bypass that detection by making my own script block, by making my own little PowerShell script that will do this. So as a defender, don't get too hung up on the fact that you have a particular detective or preventative control, because attackers can and will make their own way of bypassing it. And as you see, the level of effort required to do this is very, very modest. So the next use case is finding computers of interest. One of the things that I like to do a lot of the times when I'm in an enterprise is I try to find the weakest link. All too often, organizations have great patching policies, great configuration management, and once I get into an environment through a phish, or maybe as a pen test they give me a sacrificial machine, what I need to do then is start looking through the enterprise to find a machine that's been misconfigured, because then I can set up shop on that misconfigured machine. And usually these are systems that are like things like the shipping computer or the office print server or things like that. But doing this by hand is incredibly tedious and it doesn't scale. So once you have that toehold, you have to leverage it and get into that jump off point. And once you do, you can totally destroy the network. So there's a couple ways of doing this. One of my favorite is a PowerShell tool called Bloodhound. And there's been lots of talks about Bloodhound. I'm not going to reiterate it right now. But what's nifty about Bloodhound is that you can use this to find systems that are, you can hopscotch through network to basically steal credentials and achieve domain admin in the minimum number of hops. So that's a very powerful tool that you can use. Another one is tools like Kanza, which are normally used for defensive capabilities, allow you to pull the like configuration info. And as an attacker, this is needful for us because we can look for registry keys or missing patches that we can use to do our attack. One of the things that makes me sad is that we still see things like MS-0867, and I realize that's over 10 years old now. MS-08067 is still found from time to time on pen tests. And what you can do is use tools like Kanza to find, hey, here's a particular config that I'm of interest. Or you can just write your own. It's not that hard to do. All you need to do is find a particular condition that you want and that you can attack and use that to your own advantage. And I want to point this out, and there's no way I can really demo this without having massive violations of NDAs, but writing your own attack or your own enumeration for a particular flaw is where you can shine as a pen tester, because what you're going to be doing with this is you're going to discover a flaw that's inherent in some house-built application or some configuration that's part of their base image that is a flaw that may not exist anywhere else. If you discover that on that host system or on that gold image, you can now write your own attack and be off to the races and cause all kinds of damage and provide all kinds of value by showing them how you're able to go after a system. So, last thing that I want to talk about and spend a little bit of time on is reporting. So reporting is super ultra critical because as a pen tester, that's literally the only artifact that should be left at the end of an engagement. And note that I do say should. I'll be the first to admit there have been times that I had a remote shell that was up and running for too long and had to work with a client to get it terminated. But in an ideal world, all that you will have left is your report. And the other thing that's interesting about the report is that your report is really the only thing that the business is probably going to be able to understand. Because if you say, hey, look, I got all these shells, they won't understand what that's about. What we need to do is get better at showing the business case, the so what, and we do that through our reporting. The irony is just about everybody dislikes doing their reporting. Raise your hand if you're listening live. Please raise your hand and say that you like doing the reporting. I'm not expecting many hands to go up. Okay. And then, so here's the deal, scripts to the rescue. And this isn't that hard. It's actually quite easy. PowerShell is good about merging and working with files. And so there's a pretty interesting way that this works. You simply take a bunch of text files or document files or whatever you do that you want, you merge them, and then you have a finalized report. And if you want to get into this, I highly recommend that you read this using PowerShell in Word. I will be tweeting this link after the webcast is done. I really, really can't say enough things about how easy and powerful this is as a particular pen tester. So I've got a little demo here. I've got a tool called DocStitcher where I have a command injection text file and I have my SQL injection text file. And what you can do with PowerShell is you actually can interact with Word and invoke the Word application. Here, let me show you how this works. Let me slide this over and make it visible. So what you can do within Word is actually create a Word application. This code isn't quite cleaned up, but what we're doing here is we're creating a Word application object, which means we're actually going to start Microsoft Word. And then when it starts, we're going to add, meaning create our documents, and we have the selection. And then once we have that, we are going to pull elements from this particular path where my findings directory is. And what I can do now is invoke Word, stick the contents of those files into my single file, and now I have a single document. So what I've done here is I'm going to run this. This takes a moment to run, and while that's running, I'm going to show you a sample output. In this case, let me zoom in here a little bit. What I did was it put together the text files that I had. Now, you can put whatever you want in here, and if you follow the link that I sent you, or that I'll be tweeting here in a little bit, that link actually walks you through how you can apply formatting to particular objects, lines, or whatever you want. So you want colors, you want something to be a heading setting, you absolutely can do that. You want it bolded, you can do that too. So it's just like using Word programmatically. If you've never done that before, it's a touch tedious. I'll caution you there. But if you've done it before using Perl, if you're an older hacker like me, you might have done it with Perl. Python has plenty of good features that allow you to write to the various Office document formats. Conceptually, it's no different from that. So what I do is I will take my findings and I will put, as I get a finding, I will put it in a findings directory, and then I run this command and it will stitch all the findings together, and then I've got the skeleton of my report. Now, I'm going to be very clear about this. I would feel very dirty if I just passed off that report to the client, and that gets me to our closing thoughts. You don't want to automate everything. Automation should be an augmentation of your capability. If all you are is a bunch of scripts, then what's the value you bring? And to quote a good friend of mine, John Strand, don't be a pen test puppy mill. Don't be the script kiddie pen tester. You should be using automation to help facilitate your pen tests, but it shouldn't be the only thing that you do. Also, please, please, please test your automation in a non-production environment first. The reason why is typos and mistakes now happen at an enterprise scale. And you guys saw how easy it is earlier in the pen test, or earlier in this report, you saw that I had too many curly braces in one of my sample scripts. If I had ran that across the network without testing, I would have been invoking a whole lot of noise and maybe had been caught with no gain. So please, please test before you go against all the other systems. So at this point, I'll open it up to Q&A if there's any Q&A. Typically, there is some.
There is. Hey, first of all, thanks. And for anyone listening, please go ahead and ask your questions if you have some. If you're thinking of them now, go ahead and type them in while we answer these other questions. So Mick, going back to the find interesting file, does it support alternate data streams?
Interesting. You know what? I don't. You know what? I've never tried that. Let's give that a try. We'll do some science right now. So let's see here. So I just want to make sure that find interesting files is still okay. Cool. We're good. And then, so for those of you who don't know, alternate data streams are basically files that can get attached to other files or directories. Okay. If this, we'll see. So what I've done is I've created an alternate data stream, and when I do an ls, let's do ls star.text. we see my demo list.txt and test.txt, but we don't see this hidden text. And what's weird is I can still interact with it even though it's not visible. Test.txt, hidden.txt. And this pops up, not the actual text, the test text file that we wanted. So normally the way you have to show this is get child item, and then you do stream, or get item, I'm sorry, it's get item, and then stream star, and then you do star.txt, and you'll see, you should see, yep, you can see the alternate data stream this way. Now, I don't know if find interesting file will work on this, so find interesting file, and then search terms. We're going to do hidden, and we're going to do it on star.txt. And it doesn't look like it found it. That is curious. So it does work. The find interesting file works. It found test, but it did not find the hidden. So that's good to know. If some of you want to go out and make a name for yourselves, you could make a tweak to the find interesting file script and make that code happen. If nobody does that after a couple weeks, when things slow down for me a little bit, I will probably be putting that into GitHub. So it's a race. See if you can beat me. That was an awesome question, and I always love doing science to find things out.
All right, Mick, next question. Any use cases that have come up regarding using PowerShell to protect versus attack, or check configs and audit, things like that?
Oh, so yeah, absolutely. PowerShell is a great framework, a great tool to be using for more of a blue team side of things. One of my favorite use cases is a tool that was mentioned earlier in the podcast is Kanza. Kanza actually was built from the ground up with that idea in mind. You run Kanza against your network, especially against the servers. And especially against the desktops, not the servers. The reason you run Kanza against the desktops is most desktops in an organization are going to be configured in similar ways. Now, maybe not across the entire company or the entire government, but what you can do is stick within a particular government unit or business unit, and you will find that most desktops are configured the same. What Kanza does beautifully is it helps identify the outlier systems. So the machine that has a config setting that nobody else has. When you find those machines, what you can do is investigate why are you different from everyone else. And the beauty of this particular technique, and one of the reasons I really love Kanza, is I'm a consultant. I will oftentimes come into a client network and they say, find the machines that are messed up. Well, I don't know what normal looks like in their environment. They don't have baselines. So what I can do is say, hey, let's assume that most of the machines are configured somewhat appropriately. And then for the machines that are configured differently, that's something that we would want to take action on. And so that's a beautiful use case of PowerShell from a defensive and detective type control.
This is a question I think some people will have. It's, can you discuss your PowerShell profile and its features, such as it showing you running as a standard user?
Oh, sure. So let's slide over to my machine. This is not the first time I've heard people ask about this, so I'll be posting this up on GitHub as well. What you have in PowerShell is you can have a profile, and it's a variable that allows you to set things that are done on your own system. And let me show you. The prompt function is the one that will show what's happening at the command line. You'll note the most notable thing that I've done differently is I will have the current time and the UTC offset of the machine I'm working on. And this is awesome because I hate doing post-event correlations. And so by doing this, I can very quickly and easily see, which user I was doing. If the console title has administrator in it, it will then say you're administrator. If it doesn't, it knows you're running as a standard user. Then it will say which computer name you're at and then give the current time. And this makes reporting so much easier because each time I hit enter, you'll note that the time is different. It just increments by 1. And this coupled with the transaction or transcription log that I set up right here, this transcript log, I can have a list of everything that I ran in that PowerShell session and exactly what time it was running. So that's pretty cool. Then I have a few other fun functions that I'm still working on where I can change the color of the background for quick demos. As you can see, this is not fully baked in though, the function console color. I don't have a way to call it right now, but I can actually interact with the different, like change the color to make it red. And you'll often see me doing this now on conferences, like at hacker conventions. I'll be like, oh, this red console is the attacker, the blue console is the defender. So I'll be posting that up to GitHub probably later today. So thanks for mentioning that.
Hey, Mick, for the recording and for people watching now, could you go ahead and bring up your GitHub link so that way everyone can see it and write it down?
Yes. So my GitHub is, so I've got a couple hidden ones, but let's do a public one here. My GitHub is GitHub Besimo Rhino, which is an old BBS handle of mine. So GitHub/Besimo Rhino is where you can see my code, and I'll be sharing that too.
All right. Next question: how frequently do you leverage the PowerShell profile as a persistence mechanism?
Oh, so one thing that you can do, let's swap back out here. The PowerShell console or profile is something that gets launched whenever a user starts a PowerShell session. The problem is I don't typically see it used as an attack method, and the reason why is this. Let me show you this. I'm going to exit out entirely. I don't have my PowerShell running right now. When I launch PowerShell for the first time, you get an error because I am not allowing this script to run. Many folks are going to be running their execution policies are going to be restricted or remote signed. And I've found that if people are doing a good job, you're going to actually have this pop up. Now, if, however, when you do a git execution policy and you see bypass or unrestricted or something like that, you can use the PowerShell profile as a persistence method so that when somebody runs a PowerShell script or like launches a PowerShell console, a particular command of your choice runs. The catch is I don't know if I would be comfortable doing this because cleanup on that can be a little tricky. I would only do this as an attack if I know that I'm going to be with the client for a couple days, maybe even a week after, because you're going to have to make sure that you clean up all the profiles that you modify. But you absolutely can do that. I've just never done that in the real world. I have done that in my lab, though, and it is kind of fun.
All right, Mick, one of the final two questions, unless any new ones pop up. But it is, as a beginner for PowerShell, can you recommend resources I can utilize to further enhance my learning?
Yes. So I will send some tweets on that. Real quick, though, there's really 3 commands, and this comes from a buddy of mine, Carlos Perez. The 3 commands you need to know are git help, and that will help you like learn about particular things about command lists. So git help. The next one is git command, which will show you all the commands that are available to you. And then finally, the last one is get member. And what get member does is it takes the output of one command and breaks it down and tells you what sort of objects you're going to have. So for instance, using get member is if you have like get child item star, we can see here's my different directories. If I pipe it to get member, I now know here's the different objects that I have for these different data types. So the system.io directory info, I know that I can use system.io.directoryinfo.create to create something, to create a directory. You can delete them using this way. It's a very powerful way of walking through PowerShell. Now, I realize that those three, I hit you really fast with them. If you want a softer intro, the best resource that I can recommend is overworkedadmin.com. Overworkedadmin.com has a series of homeworks that you can go through, and it gives you sample problems to solve, and it also gives you some options that allows you to know how to, you know, are you heading in the right direction? Because some of the overworked admin homework, there's no one right or wrong way to do them. It just says, here's some ways that you can go about accomplishing this task. So most folks that I've pointed to, overworkedadmin.com, really like it. But very quickly, once you go through those, you'll see that using the get help, get command, and get member, with those three commands, you're pretty much off to the races as a PowerShell hacker.
Excellent. Last question. Do you have any links that you can share where we can find cool PowerShell scripts to automate building boxes like Exchange, SharePoint, Domain Controller, etc.?
Yeah, there's actually a really good collection of those, and I will send some. Not only are there ones that are how to build locals, but there are some interesting PowerShell scripts, especially out on GitHub, for building Azure instances or Amazon instances. So I'll send a tweet about that.
Okay. So if you're listening and you enjoyed this webcast, please let us know. Also, if you'd like us to do additional PowerShell for pen testing webcasts, please let us know. And if you're listening to the recording or if you're on YouTube, please leave a comment down below if you have any questions, and we'll pass them on to Mick. With that, Mick, do you have any final words before we turn it over to Carol?
Nope. Thanks for attending these. Please let me know what you'd like to see next in the next series of webcasts. And be patient. I'll be posting those over the next day or so. So thanks a lot, guys. I had a whole lot of fun. I hope you did too.
Okay, Carol.
All right. Thank you so much, Mick, for your great presentation, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.